Bruchem Haboim. Welcome to our overview of Masechta Sanhedrin. Masechta Sanhedrin focuses primarily on the mitzvah of setting up a system of courts throughout Eretz Yisrael, referred to as Batei Dinim, courts of law where Dayanim, judges, would hear and decide and settle all disputes. The Torah in Parsha Shoftim writes, Shoftim v'shoftim titin lecha b'chol sharecha. You shall appoint judges and officers to all your cities. Asher Hashem alikecha noislach, that Hashem gives you lishvatecha, to each of your shvatim. V'shavatu es ha'am mishpat tzedek, and they shall judge the nation a righteous judgment. Arba dargas b'batei dinim. There are 4 levels or categories of batei dinim, all of which, once their decision is rendered, is binding on the balei dinim, the litigants. Bezdin shel shloisha hadyotis. The lowest level is a bezdin comprised of 3 dayanim. Such a bezdin deals with basic, ordinary monetary disputes. Bezdin shel shloisha musmachim. A bezdin consisting of 3 ordained judges are authorized to deal with monetary disputes that could result in penalties or punishments that would be imposed by bezdin. The Gemara Daf Yigimel teaches that smicha zikenim, as the process of granting smicha was referred to, was a unique form of rabbinic ordination dating back in an unbroken chain of musmachim all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. The title of smicha was granted only to highly qualified individuals by his teacher, who himself received smicha from a previous mismach. While the word smicha seems to imply that while granting smicha, a teacher would put his hands on the student receiving smicha, as we see that Moshe Rabbeinu actually put his hands on Yeshua when he granted him smicha, nevertheless, Rav Ashi explains that it's not necessary. Smochan le b'shma kar le rabbi. They would call him by the title of rabbi, thereby officially granting him permission to judge dina knossos. The Mishnah teaches that likatchila 3 rabbanim musmachim are needed to grant smicha. However, the Gemara later proves that really only 1 should be sufficient, just as we see that Moshe Rabbeinu alone granted smicha to Yeshua. And the Gemara goes on to prove its point by relating the following heroic incident of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Am Rabbi Yehuda Merav, Baram Zachar Oisa Ish Latayv, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Shemai. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava is to be remembered for his Mesiris Nefesh. Shel Molehu Nishtachu Dina Knossos Misrael. For if not for him, Dina Knossos would have been lost forever. During his lifetime, the Roman authorities began persecuting the Yidden and outlawed smicha. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava disregarded the authorities, putting his life in danger, and continued granting smicha so that it would not be lost from Klal Yisrael. Nevertheless, after many years of galus, smicha was indeed lost, so that today we no longer have bezdin musmachim. Bezdin shel esem b'shleisha smuchim. The next level of batei dinim are the Sanhedrin Ketana, which consists of 23 dayanim, who are charged with judging capital cases, cases where the defendant could possibly be sentenced to death. Courts of 23 were appointed for any town in Eretz Yisrael with at least 120 residents. And Bezdin shel shivim ve'echet smuchim, which was the Sanhedrin Haggadah, the court of 71. The Great Sanhedrin was the highest court in the land, which consisted of 71 dayanim, and was located in Yerushalayim alongside the Azara, the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, in a large room called the Lishkas Hagazos. This court tried capital cases that were beyond the jurisdiction of the Sanhedrin Ketana, such as Navi Sheker, judging a false prophet, or Kohen Gadol, Irhani Dachas, judging a town whose residents have been persuaded to worship Avodah Zarah. Also, they are the final authority on all unresolved halachic questions that arise relating to criminal, civil cases, or religious laws. Its decisions are binding on all lower courts. Other responsibilities that affect the entire nation are setting up a Sanhedrin Ketana in all eligible cities, setting up the Jewish calendar, expanding the legal limits of walled cities, and declaring war. Our Masechta begins. Dini mamanes b'shleisha. The Mishnah begins by teaching that when dealing with disputes over unpaid loans, referred to as haydais, balvais, this can be resolved or judged even by shleisha dayanim hadyotis, a bezdin comprised of 3 knowledgeable men, even if they were not necessarily mismachim. Within this category of mamanes, the 2 balei din have the option, should they so agree among themselves, to be judged by even 1 single person, and as long as that person is a yachad ha-mumcha l'rab, which means that he has a reputation as being an honorable and knowledgeable man. This option was granted them by the Hachaim, kadesh le'tinol delis b'fnei lavin. If the process of recovering a loan were too complicated or burdensome, people would refrain from lending money to those in need. Therefore, the Chacham enacted several leniencies, including this one of not requiring the Baldin to go through the process of selecting a full Bezdin, based on the pasuk of B'tzedek Tishbar HaMesacha, that even a Yachid can judge as long as he does it righteously. Next, the Mishnah teaches that Gizelos v'chavolos b'shleisha. From here on, all cases discussed in the Mishnah required Bezdin Smuchim. Gizelos. If a person is convicted of theft, he is required to pay back kefil, double the actual amount stolen. If he stole a sheep or goat and shechted it or sold it, the Torah requires him to pay back 4 times the value of the animal. And if he stole an ox and shechted it or sold it, he's required to pay back 5 times its value. And v'chavolos, if someone injured another person, the halacha is that he would have to compensate the injured person for nezek, damages, tsar, pain, ripu, the doctor bills, sheves, the loss of work, uvaishis, and for the shame that he went through. Similarly, the Mishnah teaches that makos b'shleisha, malchus, that is 39 lashes, which Bezdin gives to one that has violated a lav min HaTorah, is judged by a Bezdin of 3. However, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Amru be'estrim b'shleisha. From where we know the amount needed in the Bezdin is discussed in the Gemara Dav Gimel. Shleisha min alan, the Tan Rabbanan. V'nikrav balabayis el Elikim. The person comes to Elikim. Harikan echad. That's one reference. Adu Elikim yovedabar shneim. Harikan shnayim. Second reference. Asher yishin Elikim. Harikan shleisha. Divrei b'yesha. Rabbi Yonasan does not darshan the first phrase of the pasuk, and begins to darshan from Adu Elikim yovedabar shneim. Harikan echad. Asher yishin Elikim. Harikan shnayim. However, since in Bezdin Shakal, we can't have a Bezdin with an even number, we add on one more, therefore it makes the 2 into 3. The Gemara Daf Chav Gimel discusses how these 3 judges are chosen when the Bali Din, the litigants, don't agree on which sitting Bezdin to go to. The Mishnah teaches, Zeh bar le'echad, v'zeh bar le'echad. The 2 litigants, each chooses one dayan. The Shneim bar le'en oid echad. The 2 litigants choose the 3rd one together, Divrei Meir. The 2 dayanim choose the 3rd dayan. Either way, this system ensures that each Baldin will feel confident that his argument and position will be properly considered by the judges, and therefore each Baldin would be more inclined to accept the verdict, even if it goes against him. Mishnah Daf Beis mentions Ha'oines v'mafata v'moiti shemra. Meir holds b'shleisha. V'chachamimim moiti shemra be'esrim b'shleisha. V'cham hold that while ha'oines v'mafata or v'moiti shemra, where she was found innocent, is only a matter of monetary compensation, fixed by the Torah. However, in the case of moiti shemra, if she was found guilty, it would devolve into a capital case. Therefore, they required a bezdin of 23 to begin with. Edus. The Torah writes, Al Pishnaim Edim Yakum Davar. In order to establish the truth of anyone's claim or to convict someone of Misa or Malchus, 2 witnesses are required to verify the claim. However, there are some exceptions to the 2-witness rule. In the case of an aguna, 1 witness, even one who would otherwise be disqualified, is believed to testify that her husband has died, and she may remarry based on the testimony of this single witness. The numerous lavin that dictate how a bezdin is to function. The Torah writes in Parshas Devarim, "Va'atzava esheftechem be'esahi leimer, shemoya ben achechem." The Gemara Daf Zayin teaches, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, "Asar lebezdin shelo yishmas divrei baldin, kodim sheyebe baldin chaveroi. V'asar lebezdin shelo yatim devarav ledayin, kodim sheyebe baldin chaveroi." This is a warning to both the bezdin and the litigants that bezdin may only listen to the litigants when they're both present in the courtroom at the same time, and not while only one is present. And also that bezdin should afford each litigant all the time he needs to present his case and not to cut them short. U'shafatatem tzedek bein ishu bein achav bein geroi, as Rish Lakish teaches in Daf Zayin. Rish Lakish, tzedek es adin v'achar chatcheyu. First, clarify the din in your mind as to who is telling the truth, and only then present your ruling. L'sakir upon the mishpat, he may not show favoritism to one baldin over the other, either because he is richer or even because he is poorer, by allowing him to speak more freely, or by offering him a more comfortable seat. As the pasuk says, "B'tzedek tishper ha'mesacha." B'Yehuda Omer, "Lo sakiruhu." B'Yehuda says that "Lo sakiru" can be read as "Lo sakiruhu." Do not recognize him, which means do not show favoritism in the case of a friend to bend the law in his favor. And Rabbi Elazar Omer, "Lo sanakarehu." Elazar reads "Lo sakiru" as "Lo sanakarehu," Do not distance or push away a litigant during a trial, and thereby twist the law against him. And Rashi in the Chumash explains, Kakatan kagodl tishmun, Amr Shlakish, shechav v'lecha din shel pruta kedin shel meya la'akduma. First come, first serve. L'seguru mimnei ish, Amr B'chanan, atikanis deberecha mimnei ish. Do not hold back from stating your decision out of fear of anyone. K'amishpat le'lekimhu, because if you judge incorrectly, you will, so to speak, force Hashem, who is the ultimate judge, to correct your wrongful judgment at a later time. Pshara, an out-of-court compromise or settlement. There's a three-way machlekes with regards to making a pshara, which interestingly is from one end of the spectrum to the extreme opposite. Rav Elazar holds, Asur l'diyon lasas pshara. It is absolutely forbidden for Bezdin to propose a pshara instead of following the strict halacha, eliyikif hadin azar. You go straight, whatever the halacha is. Tanakama, harashus biyad Bezdin lasas pshara. It is permitted for Bezdin to propose a pshara. Mitzvah lasas pshara. It's not only permitted, but is actually a mitzvah for Bezdin to propose a pshara rather than going through with a full-blown din Torah. And this is the accepted halacha. Me'aymin u'boitkim ha'edim. The Mishnah Daf Chav Tes teaches, Keitzad boitkim es ha'edim. How do the judges examine the edim? First, everyone is asked to leave the courtroom. Then each aid, each witness, is led into the courtroom alone, without his partner present. Before he's asked to testify, Bezdin explains to him and warns him of the severity of giving false testimony. They then begin to thoroughly examine the witness by asking questions which fall into two categories, chakiros and bedikos. Chakiros refers to basic questions that are required to be answered by all witnesses. Failure to answer any of the chakiros disqualifies the testimony. On Daf Mem, the Mishnah teaches, Beis Shvua, in which Shemitah cycle, Beis Shana, in which year, Beis Chodesh, in which month, Bekama b'Chodesh, what day of the month, Beis Yom, what day, Beis Shah, what hour, and Beis Malkim, in which place. Failure to just answer any one of these Chakira questions disqualifies the Eidim, because they are then considered as Eidu She'iyat Yochel Azima. All Eidim must at least have the possibility of becoming Eidim Zayman. In other words, when another set of Eidim testify in front of Bezdin that Imanu Hayisim, that the original set of Eidim was elsewhere with us at the time when the incident in question took place, they then become Eidim Zayman. But this would only be possible if the original set of Eidim answered all 7 Chakira questions. But if they do not answer all 7, they are in effect Eidim Shi'at Yochel Azima. And the klal is that Eidu Shi'at Yochel Azima lo yishma Eidus. Bedikas. Bedikas are the additional questions that Bezdin ask in order to establish the particulars of the case, as well as to test the truthfulness of the Eidim. The inability of a witness to answer any of these questions does not disqualify a witness. However, echad chakiros be'echad bedikos bezman shemechishim zeh edus betela. If the Eidim contradict each other during the chakiros and even during the bedikos, they're disqualified. However, Rabbi Yehuda on the Flama teaches that this requirement is only for dinei nefashis. However, edus hamachesha zuazu bebedikos kshera b'dinei mamanas. Once Bezdin is satisfied with their answers, both Eidim are brought into the courtroom to testify. Eid Mipi Eid, second-hand testimony. Only testimony that both Eidim witness with their own eyes are accepted by Bezdin. Therefore, continues the Mishnah Daf Chav Tes, Im Amar hu Amar li shani chayiv loy, the defendant himself told me that he owes that person money. Or, Ish pleini Amar li shu chayiv loy, someone whom I trust told me that the defendant owes that person money. Loy maklum. These testimonies are not accepted until both witnesses claim that the defendant admitted to us in front of the claimant that he owes him the money. Once Bezdin is done hearing the case, they begin to deliberate among themselves. Are basically 10 differences between din mominus, monetary cases, and din nefashis, capital cases. The Mishnah Daf Lamed Beis teaches that when it comes to din mominus, monetary cases, paischin bein l'schus bein l'chayv. the deliberation can begin with either an argument in favor or against the defendant. However, when it comes to din nefashos, capital cases, peischin b'schus v'lei b'chayva. The deliberation must begin with arguments in favor of acquitting the defendant, and only then do they listen to opposing arguments. Other differences between din mamanis and din nefashos. But din mamanis, bezdin shel shalosh hadyotis. When it comes to monetary cases, a court of 3 regular people, machrin es adin, they can decide the judgment, al pi reiv shel dayin echad, based on the simple majority of one judge, bein l'schos, bein l'chayva, whether it's in his favor or against him, and goyim es adin b'ay b'yom sheschilu b'ay. You could even conclude the court case on the day that you started the case itself. Bedin nefashos, bebezdin shel esim v'shleisha mumchin u'miyuchasim machrin es adin l'schos al pi reiv shel dayin echad, aber ein machrin es adin l'chayv el al pi reiv shel shnei dayan. You could decide for the merit based on the majority of one judge, but against him has to be at least a majority of 2 judges. The pasuk which discusses the dayanim that are judging din nefashos writes, Lo sia achiram l'rois, achiram l'hatis. The Mishnah explains, Lo katiyas l'toiva, hatiyas l'ra, hatiyas l'toiva pi'echad, hatiyas l'ra pi'shnayim. A simple majority is enough when the judgment is for the good, but for a bad judgment, a majority of at least 2 is necessary. And in goyim nesadin l'chayva boy b'yem el l'macher, as Rashi explains, im lo'yachol l'zakayse b'yem rishon, ein paiskim es dina l'chayva el malinin es dina ad l'macher sheme yimtza b'lay l'schos. That if they conclude that the defendant is guilty, they must wait until tomorrow before they issue their verdict, so that the judges can review their decision overnight and possibly find some schos for the defendant. Plus other distinctions between din mamanis and din nefashos. For example, if after they rendered their psak din, they became aware that they paskin wrong, how are they to proceed? And also, are they, meaning the bezdin, liable to any damages caused by the wrong verdict? Also, once a dayan expressed his opinion, is he allowed to change his mind? Is there a difference between din mamanis and din nefashos? Arba Mrs. Bezdin. The Gemara at the beginning of the 7th parak teaches, Arba Mrs. Bezdin nimsru lebezdin. Skila, stoning, 18 cases. Sreifa, burning, pouring hot lead down the defendant's throat, 10 cases. Hereg, beheading, 2 cases. And chenek, strangling, 6 cases. The Mishnah Daf Mem Beis teaches, Nigmer hadin, meitzin oisei l'saklai. Mishnah Mem Beis uses the case of skila as a starting point in detailing the execution of the Arba Misa Bezdin. Once Bezdin paskins that the defendant is indeed guilty in this Mechuyev Misa, they do not delay in giving him his punishment and go directly from the courtroom to the Beis HaSkila. Beis HaSkila hayachutz la Bezdin. The Beis HaSkila was located some distance from the courthouse, chutz l'sholosh machnes, which was at least 6 mil away, or about 4.5 miles from Bezdin, k'dish le'yiru Bezdin kireitzchem, so that Bezdin does not appear to be too eager to put the condemned to death. And also in the hopes that in the meantime a new reason will be found to acquit the accused and spare him from death. A person with a flag stands at the door of the courtroom while a rider sits, waiting on the horse, waiting to see if indeed someone shows up at Bezdin with new information. But Kavos Yetz Lefanov, while escorting out the condemned defendant, Bezdin announces that Ish Pleni ben Pleni Yetz Lisakal Asha Avra Avera Plenis. If someone comes running to Bezdin and says that Yeshli Limadalav Schus, I have what to say in his favor, Bezdin reopens the case. The riders then quickly sent to catch up to the accused and bring him back to the courthouse for a retrial before it's too late. If they find this new information to be valid, the defendant is set free. And if not, then they continue back out to the Beis HaSkila. On Daf Mem Gimel, the Mishnah continues, Hayirachik mi Beis HaSkila ke'eser amos, oimrim loy hisvada. Shekin derech ha'mamasin mizvadin. Shekol mizvada yesh lechelik lo'olam haba. As they near the Beis HaSkila, they encourage the defendant to say vidui, confession, so that he should be zeichel lo'olam haba. Hayirachik mi Beis HaSkila arba amos, mafshit noisei es begadav. When he's about 4 amos away, they undress him, lead him up to the top of the roof, which was twice the height of an average man, and from where one of the witnesses then pushes him over from behind. If he doesn't die from the fall, then both witnesses drop a large heavy rock on his chest. If he still didn't die, Then all those present throw rocks on him until he dies, as the pasuk says, Yada edim tia by b'rishayin la'misoi b'yad kala'am b'achreina. And Rabbi Eliezer says, Kol ha'neskalim nitlan. Before they bury him, they hang him by his hands, which were tied above his head, for just a few moments, and then immediately take him down and bury him. If they leave him hanging overnight, they're over on the lav of leisalim nivlasei al eitz, ki kover tikberenu ki kilas elikim tali. As him being left overnight greatly diminishes Hashem's honor. Echad leneskalim and neschafim. He is then buried in one of two special cemeteries that Bezdin had designated. One for those who receive skila, or sreifa, and one for those who received hereg or chenek. Once the body became decomposed, they rebury the remains b'kibrei avaisav in his family plot. Other major topics discussed in our Masechta are Dinu Iber HaChodesh V'Hashana, setting up the Jewish calendar, Dinu B'Sera Moir, the laws of the rebellious son, Zakon Mamre, a Rav who rebels against the Pesach of the Sanhedrin, Novi Sheker, a false prophet, just to name a few. And Perek Chelik, the last Perek in our Masechta, which famously begins with Kol Yisrael Yesh Lem Chelik L'Olam Haba. All of Yisrael, even sinners, have a share in Olam Haba, the world to come. However, the Mishnah goes on to teach that there are some exceptions. And in the first half of the Perek, the Gemara discusses some of these exceptions. Famous individuals who, on account of the severity of their sins, were disqualified from entering Olam Haba. And then later on in the Perek, the Gemara goes on to discuss many fascinating agadas that deal extensively with Yemais Mashiach, Olam Haba, Lasad Lavai, Gan Eden, and Gehenim, and Tchias HaMesim. In closing, the seriousness and importance of this mitzvah of establishing a proper justice system cannot be overemphasized. As the Gemara relates, Dav Zayin, Amr of Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amr Rabbi Yonasan, Kol dayin shadon din emes lamitoi, any judge that judges a true judgment, Mashra Shechina b'Yisrael, has the divine presence rest among the Jewish people. On the other hand, Kol dayin she'einu don din emes lamitoi, if a judge does not judge a true judgment, he causes the divine presence to be removed from the Jewish people. And Dav Zayin, the Gemara relates, a judge should always see himself as if a sword is laying there between his thighs, and Gehenna is open from beneath him. Like it says in the pasuk, to emphasize this point, the Gemara relates the following: Rav the day Rav would go to a courthouse to judge a case, he'd be overcome with dread, being that he took the role of being part of Bezdin very serious, and he would say, out of my own free will, I now do go towards my possible death. As I neglect the responsibilities I have to my family. And since I'm not allowed to charge any fee for this service, I will at the end of the day come home empty-handed. Halavai, I should return home as clean and innocent as when I left home this morning, without having committed any sin, by inadvertently rendering a false verdict. Clearly we see from Rav's attitude how seriously he took his responsibility of being a dayan. And as the Marsha adds, that even though Rav was a musmach, would Al Pi Din be exempt from being financially responsible for any mistake his Bezdin would make? Nevertheless, if he did make a wrong judgment, he would pay out of his own pocket and reimburse the innocent party. The institution of smicha came to an end towards the 4th century of the Common Era, when persecution of the Jewish nation by the Roman authorities drove most of the Yidden out of Eretz Yisrael. V'hiratzin, we should be zoicha to see the Geula Shlema B'Karev, B'Binyan Beis HaMikdash, along with the Sanhedrin HaGadol and the Lishkas HaGazes, B'Mheira B'Yimeinu Amen.